Having completed our first read of Health and Human Services yesterday, we're going to begin today with K through 12. Due to some caucus obligations, we will probably have to break a little before 1 o'clock and reconvene at 2, and with every intention of getting through K through 12 and hopefully even begin a little bit on higher education. So that's the game plan for today, and continuing moving forward so we get through this book before the end of the week. Ms. Bosler, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Keely Bosler, Department of Finance. So the first issue we have here is on page 1, and I'll probably just take a little time at the beginning here to talk about how our entire message, I think, is going to be in this education section is really that all of these expenditure levels are based on LAO revenues that are about $3 billion higher in the budget year than the administration's estimates. And we don't support those at this time. We think most of the difference is in highly volatile income tax revenues that we don't want to build ongoing programs on over the forecast period. Just a reminder that even under our budget projections, the out-year forecast is very tight, and by 2018-19, for a variety of factors, including the triggering off of Proposition 30 revenues, we actually project a $2.5 billion deficit. Here on the first page is the significant actions that both houses took in the area of early childhood education. Again, our main concern is really that both, even though they did very different things, and I think the LAO is prepared to talk about all the different details, they both commit about $1 billion in ongoing spending, and this obviously is of great concern to us given our current revenue structure. I just want to talk also a little bit about what we have done in early childhood education over the last 2 years and is reflected in this budget. Because last year we did add approximately 13,000 slots to the current system, preschool slots, and some AP voucher slots, and about $660 million total funds, $412 million general fund has been restored with some rate increases and also those additional slots.
Ms. Bosler, are you suggesting that was in the governor's proposal?
That is reflected in our budget over what was invested in 2014 and then also reflected in the budget.
I just want to clarify that was not a part of the governor's proposal in 14.
It was what was approved in the 2014 Budget Act.
Right,
yeah.
Due to our advocacy. I just want to be clear.
Yes.
No, I'm
yes.
just not
so, but
to strain a point,
state is committed. Yes, the state is committed.
That's good to know.
The state has committed to those additional increases. Just a little bit about what we funded in this budget. We fully funded the CalWORKs caseload, which is an entitlement. We funded growth in COLA. And then we also have some targeted additional preschool slots that are related to a larger special education package that we put forward in the May revision. And I will end there.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Bosler. Ms. Chu, welcome back. I know you have a handout.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, chairs members. We have a handout that the sergeant should have passed around. My name is Carolyn Chu with the Legislative Analyst's Office, and first I'll walk through the two packages from the two houses and then provide some guidelines from our office in thinking about how to put together your Child Care and Development Conference package. Maybe, though, I'll first give some quick background on the Child Care and Development programs writ large in the state. We have two primary mechanisms for providing subsidized child care in California. The first is through vouchers, which are given out through the Alternative Payment Program and the CalWORKs programs, and the second are contracts, which are operated through the General Child Care Program and the State Preschool Program. Those two programs have different reimbursement rate structures, which will be important for the context of the two packages in the two houses. And generally speaking, the Child Care and Development programs serve low-income working families in the state of California. So moving to the first page of our handout, overall, the two plans both increase spending on child care and development programs significantly. The Senate plan increases spending by $331 million in the budget year, and the Assembly plan would increase funding by a total of $606 million in the budget year. There's significant commonalities across the two houses, despite the total amounts being different. Particularly, both houses focus on increasing rates and slots across all of the capped programs. The capped programs being those programs that are for non-CalWORKs participants. So CalWORKs participants are guaranteed subsidized childcare, whereas other low-income working families are not guaranteed subsidized childcare. So the increases in slots are targeted to those programs for low-income working families outside of the CalWORKs program. In addition, both houses extend collective bargaining rights to family childcare workers. In terms of the differences between the two plans, the Assembly plan spends more on quality improvement activities, where the state is required under federal law to do a number of different quality improvement activities as a condition of our Child Care and Development Fund that we receive from the federal government. In addition, the Assembly plan modifies some of the program eligibility criteria. And lastly, the Senate plan shifts all of this child care and development programs into the Proposition 98 guarantee in the budget year, with the exception of CalWORK Stage 1. Moving to page 2, the next 2 pages go through the details of the individual plans, so I'll walk through those. First issue, both houses provide a regional market rate increase. The regional market rate is a county-specific child care reimbursement rate system that applies to the CalWORKs and the alternative payment programs. The Senate's action removes the deficit factor from the 2009 RMR survey starting July 1, 2015. So what this means is last year, the regional market rate was updated as part of the 2014-15 Budget Act. It was updated to the 2009 survey, but with a 10% deficit factor. This action would remove that deficit factor. Under the Assembly's action, the regional market rate would be updated to the 85th percentile of the 2014 regional market rate survey. The state does a regional market rate survey roughly every 2 years, so we have the surveys from the past years as well as up through 2014. The Assembly's action would apply a 10% deficit factor to the 85th percentile of the 2014 regional market rate survey, and that rate update would start on January 1st, 2016. The second issue, alternative payment program slots. These are vouchers for non-CalWORKs families. The Senate's action would add 13,200 slots starting in July, and the Assembly's action would add 10,000 slots starting January 1, 2016. The standard reimbursement rate, which is the reimbursement rate that applies to the general child care and state preschool programs. This is a standard rate across all counties in the state. The only adjustments made to that rate are based on the age of the child and the duration of care. The Senate's action would increase the standard reimbursement rate by 4.4% starting in July, and the Assembly's action would increase the standard reimbursement rate by 20% starting in January. The remaining actions all are part of the Assembly package. So the Assembly package provides $80 million in quality improvement activities, including an infant and toddler quality rating and improvement system block grant, funding for a community college consortia to collaborate on best practices, as well as funding for professional development activities for child care providers. In addition, the Assembly action increases program eligibility from 70% of state median income, which is roughly $42,000 for a family of 3, to 100% of state median income. The Assembly action also increases the license exempt rate. These are family, friend, and neighbor providers from 60% of the family child care home rate to 70% of the family child care home rate. The Assembly action also increases the standard reimbursement rate adjustment factors. So these are increases to the standard reimbursement rate based on the age of the child and the duration of the care. Moving to the next page, the Assembly action would provide 10,500 full-day state preschool slots beginning in March. And the Assembly action would also increase the Alternative Payment Agency's administrative support allowance. These are the agencies that actually administer the vouchers for programs on the ground, from 17.5% to 20%. The Assembly action would also limit income changes, reporting of income changes to changes greater than 10%. So right now, families in the subsidized child care programs are required to report any changes in their income to ensure that they remain eligible for the programs. So this action would limit the extent to which families have to report any changes in income. The last two actions from the Assembly reinstates the meal reimbursement, the state meal reimbursement that the state provided in prior years, and provides funding for a consumer education website regarding childcare programs. So if you move to the next page, the figure illustrates the differences in the scoring of the two houses' actions. You can see that the Senate plan increases and moves funding from the non-Proposition 98 side of the budget into the Proposition 98 guarantee. All of the augmentations, the lighter segment of the larger bar under the Senate plan, happen before the rebenching takes place. So the rebenching moves the existing programs from the non-98 side and the augmentations into the 98 guarantee. And the Senate plan also moves the preschool wrap, which is the full day program, from the non-98 side of the budget to the 98 side of the budget. And then you can see under the Assembly plan keeps the current split of programs the same as it currently is, which is simply that the state preschool program, the part day program, is the only program that's funded within the Proposition 98 guarantee. So the last two pages just cover some of the guidelines that we have in putting together your final conference package. When it comes to reimbursement rate increases, we recommend seeking consistency, simplicity, and transparency, so treating the program similarly and in a way that is reflective of the market. For slots, we recommend seeking to provide flexibility in childcare options while also providing programs that help children prepare for school. The general childcare program and the state preschool program are required to include developmentally appropriate activities in their programs. The voucher programs are not required to do so, but parents may elect programs that do include those components. And lastly, we would recommend considering new federal requirements before making changes to the quality, activities, and eligibility criteria. Recently, the federal government reauthorized the Child Care and Development Block Grant, which is the authorizing legislation covering the grant that we receive from the feds. And there are a number of changes that we need to make in order to be in compliance with that reauthorization. And so we just recommend considering what those new requirements are before making any changes. If you turn to the last page of our handout, this just gives some guidance from us on how to start in building your package. So given the various programs and the different reimbursement rate structures, specific components of the plan will depend on the size of the total augmentation that the houses make. If the legislature were to make increases to both reimbursement rate structures, substantive reimbursement rate increases cost a minimum of $175 million. With an augmentation of that size, the legislature could remove the deficit factor from the regional market rate and provide an increase of 5% to the standard reimbursement rate. On a per-child basis, these two rate increases are roughly equivalent. If the legislature approves an augmentation of less than $175 million, we recommend maximizing that effect by providing additional slots. If the legislature wishes to approve an augmentation of more than $175 million, the legislature could consider some combination of substantive reimbursement rate increases and additional slots. So the example that we give in the last bullet on our final page is just meant to be illustrative. The figure that we cite here, $475 million, is about midway between the Senate and Assembly plans. With $475 million, the legislature could update the regional market rate to the 75th percentile of the 2014 survey, provide 8,300 alternative payment program slots at that higher reimbursement rate, increase the standard reimbursement rate by 10%, and provide 7,200 general child care slots at the higher rate. Again, these reimbursement rate increases are equivalent across the two rate structures. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very comprehensive, as always. Thank you, Ms. Chu. Any questions from the committee, or we can just move on to the first page? Let's do it. All right. Early childhood education. Thank you for the presentation. And then you have another handout.
Not on early childhood education.
No, on just the overview of the conference issues for education?
Oh, for Proposition 98?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
down here at
Assemblywoman.
the end, thank you. I
Yes.
apologize. Can I just ask one quick question?
course you may.
Okay, I know you're looking to move on. So for the early childhood education, I'm just curious, given the Senate and Assembly proposals, which both would unionize the child care providers and preschool teachers, what's not contemplated in here that I can see is what the cost would be in subsequent years once this were to be put in place. And I wonder if you have some comment on that, about what the cost would be, you know, in those out years compared to what is proposed in here.
Yes, both houses did adopt collective bargaining, a new collective bargaining organization for the family child care homes. This is not something the administration supports. It's very difficult to look ahead and see what would something like that cost, but to the extent that it does increase the rate pressures, the pressure to increase rates, about a 10% rate increase across the board is equivalent to about $246 million in additional costs. So, I mean, obviously that is completely scalable, but just to give you a flavor of that.
I'm sorry, so you would, just to guesstimate, you would put the number at what for?
I wouldn't put a number on collective bargaining because the act itself does not increase costs, but the arrangement of going forward could increase cost pressures, certainly. And so to the extent that there are increased cost pressures and there's a pressure to increase rates, just an example is a 10% rate increase would increase state costs by around $250 million.
$250 million. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And so it goes without saying that until we reach an agreement with regard to revenues, the entire education package will be determined by that. Everything here that we'll be dealing with today will be left open. Before we move on to the LAO's overview of Prop 98, on that page 1, as Ms. Chu has just walked us through the early childhood education, of the governor's 6 proposed points in that first paragraph, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Bossler, but the first 4 are not in conference because we have all agreed upon them, and then 5 and 6 are also not in conference because both houses rejected. Okay. Ms. Chu. Are you presenting here, or? Okay.
Good morning, Edgar Cabral with the Legislative Analyst Office, and I believe the Sergeant passed out a handout that we have titled Prop 98, Overview of Conference Issues. And so we will provide some very high-level Prop 98 summaries, but then in terms of the differences, we were going to focus on the K-12 differences here. When you get to the higher ed section of your agenda, we will also have a separate handout that lists all the differences in the community college augmentations and funding in both packages. But turning to page 1, just briefly to describe the high-level Prop 98 spending levels in the House's packages. Both houses adopted the higher LAO revenue estimates, and so that means overall, it's primarily the biggest difference is in 15-16, where we're $3 billion above the administration's. Overall, it's $3.2 billion over the period. We also have higher property tax revenues of about $241 million across the 3 years. The Assembly plan, the minimum guarantee is based on our estimates of the minimum guarantee, and that's $5 million higher than the governor's May revision, 100 in 13-14, $172 million in 14-15, and then $723 million in 15-16. Combined, that's $900 million in additional Prop 98 spending. In the Senate plan starts with the LAO estimates of the minimum guarantee, but then makes an adjustment for the rebenching of childcare, and that increases the minimum guarantee by an additional $994 million in the budget year. So on page 2, you have the high-level summary of spending in both packages, and the governor's as well for 14-15 and 15-16. Big picture, there are not very big differences in terms of K-12 and community college spending. Most of the differences in Prop 98 here between the houses is related to the child care proposals, which you've just discussed. High level, there isn't a big difference in terms of K-12 spending in either of the packages in terms of the dollar amount, but there is some differences in some choices that both houses have made. And we cover that on page 3. So there are 3 areas where there are big differences in spending. First is the mandate backlog. The Senate provided $3 billion. The Assembly provided $3.8 billion to reduce the K-12 mandate backlog. For both houses, this is funding that's essentially one-time general purpose funding for districts to use for any purpose. To give you a comparison to the governor provided $3.6 billion. The other notable difference is related to teacher training and support. The governor did not have a proposal in his May revision, but both houses did adopt some additional action for teacher training and support. The Senate's action is to provide $800 million in one-time funding for an educator effectiveness block grant. And this would be fairly flexible for districts to conduct professional development, teacher training, induction activities, support for struggling teachers, a broad variety of teacher supports that could be spent with the $800 million. The Assembly, on the other hand, provided $190 million. It's not one time, it's ongoing in the budget year, and it's for two specific programs, the Beginning Teacher Support and Assessment Program and the Peer Assistance and Review Program. These are categoricals that existed prior to LCFF. There's also a difference in LCFF funding. Senate provided $6.5 billion, $276 million higher than the governor. Assembly provided $6.3 billion, $149 million higher than the governor. There are a few other places where there are some differences. There are differences in the amount and the structure of the funding for internet grants. There's also the Senate provides an augmentation for transportation, and then the Assembly provides augmentations for after-school programs and for foster youth services. Page 4 is just for your reference in the future if you want to get a summary of all of those major differences. We have them here, but we've talked about most of the big ones already. I'm moving to page 5. Just,
Mr. Cabral, just from one of the earlier pages, you do make note of the increase of the rebenching in the Senate plan.
Yes.
What does that do to the minimum guarantee?
That the plan increases the minimum guarantee by $994 million. And so that's the $994 million comes from the existing program. The existing program, it was $664 million plus the $330 million in augmentations. So those, essentially the program is augmented and then shifted into Prop 98. So that increases the guarantee by that amount.
Thank you.
So just in terms of factors to consider when making Prop 98 spending decisions, obviously a big decision will be which revenues you choose to adopt in your budget plan. But if you are going to use the higher LAO revenues, I think one thing we had suggested is setting aside additional funding, some of the additional funding to minimize any adverse effects if the revenues don't materialize, if there is an unexpected downturn. That is something that could help if there is an issue in the budget year where revenues don't come in as expected. The other issue is moving into 16-17, building a cushion for if you do have to make year-to-year reductions from 15-16 to 16-17. The governor and both houses allocate only $575 million in the budget year for one-time activities, and that's less than 1% of the total Prop 98 funding. So if the guarantee were to decline in 16-17, you wouldn't have to pay out the one-time funding, obviously, but if there was a reduction of more than $575 million necessary, there may need to be ongoing reductions to fund at the lower minimum guarantee. There are some similarities and things that we think is important to mention. Both houses do make LCFF the top priority for ongoing funding. This is the largest augmentation for both houses, and under any of the proposals, you would be paying more than half of the existing gap between the current year funding rates and the LCFF targets would be eliminated. So you are making substantial progress in getting to the LCFF full implementation rates. Both houses also are reducing outstanding obligations. In any of the plans, you're eliminating all of the remaining payment deferrals. Also paying off the state's emergency repair program obligation, and making substantial progress in paying off the mandate backlog. In the Senate plan, we estimate that about $1.1 billion will be remaining in outstanding mandates. In the Assembly plan, roughly $500 million. The one key area where there is a difference is this issue of providing funding for teacher support and training. I think just some high-level comments I think we would just say is the best approach really depends on the specific problem that you're trying to solve, where you think the cause of that problem is, and then what the state role should be in addressing that problem. The Senate's plan is providing more money, but on a one-time basis, and providing it with a lot of flexibility for districts to determine the best use of those funds for teacher support and professional development more broadly. The Assembly plan is providing ongoing funding, but for two very specific issues for teacher induction programs and for a program for struggling teachers. And so depending on what you think the particular issue that you want to address, each of the approaches has its pluses and minuses. I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Colleagues, any questions before we move on? All right. Thank you, Mr. Cabral.
I would just note that given the revenue difference, setting that aside for a moment, there really are quite a lot of similarities between the three houses plans, and all three houses make a significant investment into the local control funding formula, which is a very good thing. But our approach is to continue to maximize the flexibility and local control in the area of the one-time monies by providing a large mandate backlog pay down that is flexible for the local districts. And we think that teacher induction and teacher training and many other one-time expenses are things that should be prioritized at the local district level.
So it takes us to page 3 in the adult education block grant.
So this was a proposal we had in January to provide $500 million to really grow and reinvest in our adult education system. That is really a system that is a joint system between the community college system as well as the K-12 school districts. Our effort was to create a system that allowed for regional differences around the state and allowing those local regions to develop programs that really serve the workforce needs in their specific region. There's been a lot of amendments made to our original January proposal in the May revision. These amendments really were made to balance the importance of certainty for school districts and community colleges as they fund and design programs and fund existing programs, but also some flexibility for tailoring these regional programs to best meet the workforce needs locally. We also envision equal roles for the community college system and the K-12 system at the local consortia level. And I think that's really the main difference between our action and the trailer bill adopted by the Assembly. Also, I think we were understanding of the metrics and the information, basic information about outcomes that the Senate is interested in investing in, but we're concerned about building a large-scale new IT system and would like to continue to talk with your staff about how to meet those outcomes without that kind of investment in an IT system.
Do you have any comments with regard to the Senate trailer bill language? Has to do with the future role of the consortium.
We don't have anything specific right now, but we're happy to keep working on the issues. I don't have all the details myself, so I'll have to get back to you.
And Mr. Cabral, do you have any, I'm sorry, we're shifting to?
Good morning, Natasha Collins with the Legislative Analyst's Office. Just following up on Ms. Bosler's comment, both houses have approved the $500 million towards the Adult Ed Block Grant, and they've just adopted somewhat different trailer bill language in implementing the new program. Some of the key differences that remain relate to the calculation of the hold harmless provision for adult schools, as well as state-level governance and administration. And we're continuing to work with staff to help refine this language, and we'd be happy to walk through any of the differences between the language if you'd like. Pertaining to the $49.5 million one time for data systems, we think that there's been considerable agreement between the houses that common data and accountability protocols are key to evaluating and improving adult education in the state. We note that there's some lack of detail in that proposal as to how that money would be going out to local consortia and how it would fund data efforts at the state level, but that the goal is certainly laudable.
Do you have any thoughts on the amending of the apprenticeship language in the Assembly proposal?
We would note that this might lessen the flexibility of consortia to award funding to meet the needs of their constituents, of the adults in their area. Pre-apprenticeship would be included under that trailer bill, but not apprenticeship. So we would just note that that might restrict some of the flexibility of the consortia.
And with regard to reducing the role of the State Board of Education?
This is kind of a policy decision on what we want the role of the state board to be in the consortia decision-making moving forward. We can see that in some situations, the state board could step in if there was an impasse between community college and the California Department of Education. But I think that with refining trailer bill, it'll become more clear if they will actually be the tiebreaker between the two agencies, or if they will just need to agree with what the agencies were going to do anyway. So I think that's going to be in further discussions.
All right. Other questions?
There was, and I know it's not in there, but we had some discussion about the older American curriculum in terms of participation in the adult ed, and the fact that currently, I guess it's whatever exists, that they're not allowed to basically offer those courses. And so we're looking at whether or not we wanted to include in trailer bill language the opportunity for districts, if they choose to basically sponsor and offer older American courses. Oftentimes they're health-related courses or those kinds of things, or but they're basically are not leading toward a degree or certification, which is what the adult ed program focuses on primarily at this point. But going back and some, because I guess it's sunsetting this year in terms of the courses that we've offered in the past. And so as we've been made aware that those courses will no longer exist for a significant population of our community that really kind of rely upon those courses for keep themselves healthy, alert, socialization, all kinds of things such as that. Are we looking into that as possible trailer language that's there?
So this was a policy decision that was made a few years ago to really focus the adult education program, the newly designed adult education program, towards really moving people into the workforce and getting trained in a way that will allow them to get a job or a better paying job than they're currently in. So it's really been a bit of a refinement to the way we've thought about adult education. Those types of courses are absolutely very valuable. I know I've heard also about parenting courses and computer literacy courses for adults. These are things that certainly within a local education agency's LCFF allocation, they could allocate monies to that's supporting parent engagement in the classroom and those sorts of things. So there are other ways to fund those courses. The adult education program that we've really designed here and the consortia have designed over the last 2 years at the local level is really focused on workforce needs and getting more people trained in today's jobs and moving them into the workforce.
I guess you could also say equally that the primary focus with the LCFF is really to get kids in and out of high school, to have them proficient and to function so that the older, doing these other kinds of classes, child development, health classes, whatever, for other citizens would not fall logically within the LCFF. So, my concern continues to remain, and in our conversations with leadership as well as others, is that, we do very little, as I consistently say, for older Americans in terms of our budget. And we've often heard from them with regards to the fact that if there's trailer bill language that at least allows this organization, this pot of money, to consider doing other courses, that is a possibility. We're not mandating that it happens, but surely when you look at the population, and as our population gets older, and we have a larger population of that, issues of staying healthy, figuring out how to remain mentally and physically healthy is going to be a major issue that saves us lots of dollars in terms of folks being able to continue to function. As well as we're talking about Americans who've spent their whole lives investing in California most of the time. And the last thing they ask for is a little bit of the budget, and we're not able to give it to them. So I think it's something we should seriously consider. It's not a mandate, but it is some trailer bill language that gives that flexibility for older American acts, depending on the community that it's in. The adult ed program, this may be a significant need that's there that brings tremendous dividends to our educational programs.